I opened 50.
ओमज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकथां मह्यं ददति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलान् श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातां सह गणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सह गणललिता श्रीविशाख अन्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नाम्ने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारणे निर्विशेष शून्यवाद पाश्चात्य देशनाम्ने श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे. You able to hear, Prabhu?
Yes, we can hear Prabhuji.
Okay. Okay, let me hide this. Okay, and you are able to see as well, right? So, reading from Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta, Volume 2, Chapter 45, in continuation. A mature devotee could speak more directly. Tripurari would tell how the books described an ancient civilization in which people knew how life should be lived. He would present himself as a representative of an organization that had communities all over the world where people could benefit from the example of an alternative lifestyle. Tripurari and others were able to be both personal and, in a casual way, philosophical as they spoke about spiritual life. They made quick friends with strangers and convinced them to take books. But more and more devotees were taking up book distribution, and many were inexperienced. Srila Prabhupada's philosophy was clear, but different interpretations persisted. Without referring to specific techniques, Prabhupada simply stressed the purity of book distribution and encouraged the book distributors to continue without interruption. The main thing was to distribute books. Devotees continued to press Srila Prabhupada for further clarification. The book distributors were concerned that the urgency of book distribution not be minimized, whereas other responsible ISKCON leaders were concerned that loose practices might hamper the society's progress. Prabhupada replied to questions by Bali Mardana of New York with a letter that became particularly influential. The real preaching is selling books. You should know the tactic how to sell without irritating. What your lecture will do for 3 minutes, but if he reads one page, his life may be turned. We don't want to irritate anyone, however. If he goes away by your aggressive tactics, then you are nonsense and it is your failure. Neither you could sell a book, neither he would remain. But if he buys a book, that is the real successful preaching. Prabhupada's position was clear. The books should be sold, but expertly. And lest there be any doubt, Prabhupada reiterated that the book distribution was the best preaching. The success of your preaching will be substantiated by how many books are sold. Prabhupada also wrote, the art is to sell many books and not to irritate the public. As books continue to go out by the millions, many people express their thanks to receiving a book. Only occasionally will someone complain. But within ISKCON, the dialogue regarding book distribution techniques continued. When Sri Govinda, the president of ISKCON Chicago, wrote Prabhupada, Prabhupada encouraged him in his attempt to reform the devotees engaged in excessive practices. So it is not very much advisable to make lies just to sell books. If we simply stick to describing how wonderful is Krishna, that will not be a lie. But other things, lies, they will not help us to train ourselves in truthfulness. Lie to some, not to others. That is not a good philosophy. Rather, the Brahmins are always truthful, even to their enemies. There is sufficient merit in our books, and if you simply describe these sincerely to anyone, they will buy. That art you must develop, not art of lying. Convince them to give by your preaching the absolute truth, not by tricking. That is a more mature stage of development of Krishna consciousness. November 1973. Scores of men and women were going out every day to distribute books. One, one November day, the devotees of the New York City temple broke the ISKCON world record by distributing 13,200 pieces of literature. On the same day, they also distributed 15,000 pieces of prasadam. The ISKCON total for 1973 was 41,000, no, even bigger, um, 41 lakh 69,000 books sold. When Srila Prabhupada received these figures, he replied to Rameshwaram, I have faith in your words that next year the figures will be far beyond what they were last year. It is the nature of spiritual energy. It is always increasing if we just apply our energy. Early in Jan 1974, Srila Prabhupada again returned to Los Angeles. One morning, he gave a Srimad Bhagavatam lecture stressing book distribution. There is no literature throughout the universe like Srimad Bhagavatam, he said. There is no comparison or competition. Every word is for the good of human society. Each and every word. Therefore, we stress so much in the book distribution. Somehow or other, if the book goes in one's hand, he'll be benefited. At least he'll see. I have taken so much price. Let me see what is there. If he reads one shloka, his life will become successful. If he reads one shloka, one word, this is such a nice thing. Therefore, we are stressing so much. Please distribute books, distribute books, distribute books. The year 1974 began with what appeared to be a serious setback. The Supreme Court ruled against Vietnamese war protesters distributing political leaflets in private malls. Citizens of non-profit groups, religious included, could solicit on private property only with permission from the proprietor. The malls that the book distributors had frequented were suddenly off limits. The same constitution that barred the devotees from the private property, however, gave them access to public property. And when ISKCON devotees filed a lawsuit against the city-owned Las Vegas airport, they won an immediate injunction on the basis that the airport was denying them their right to free speech. This ruling promised to open a new era in book distribution with possibility of legalizing Sankirtana in all major airports. Devotees saw this as proof that Krishna was working through Prabhupada to increase book distribution. No previous spiritual master had ever distributed Vedic literature on so great a scale. This was another sign that Srila Prabhupada was Krishna's empowered representative, and by the devotees' efforts to follow Prabhupada's order, Krishna was empowering them also, but only if they were willing to go through the trials of surrender and renunciation. Praghosha, I went out on one day to the airport and I walked up to one black man and said, "Excuse me, sir." And bam, he punched me right in the face and knocked me down. At that moment, so many thoughts went through my mind. I could just hear Tripurari's words ringing in my ears from the class that morning. We must be determined. So I just said to myself, well, I'll just stand right back up and keep trying. I stood up and I got the inspiration to just turn around and try to hand the next person one of Roper's books. Another time, my husband and wife approached me, but the husband didn't want anything to do with me. When the woman saw that the book was spiritual, she stopped and said, "What's this book about?" I said very bluntly, "This book explains birth and death and what's beyond." She said, "Oh." Then she turned to her husband and said, "Please buy it." But he said, "I don't want it. Come on, let's go." She said, "Please." But her husband said, "You buy it." And he walked off. So she stayed with me and said, "Could you tell me a little more about this?" I started to explain the book and then I said, "Where are you coming from?" She said, "I'm coming from Rochester." Then she revealed to me that she was coming from the Mayo Clinic and that she had terminal cancer and was going to die. She said, "I desperately want to read this book." She gave me the $10 and said, "Thank you very much." Then she took the book and ran off. A little later, she came back and found me and shook my hand and thanked me. These kind of experiences that devotees would have day in and day out gave us the feeling of being like emissaries or representatives of something very special. By this, we became more attached to Srila Prabhupada and to executing his work. We would see these miracles take place. Keshav Bharati. I used to distribute books in San Francisco airport. I thought that this airport was particularly difficult there and that if I could be in Los Angeles, I could probably distribute as many books as Tripurari. I was a little proud. Then I got the chance to distribute with him. I am very outgoing and gregarious, so I didn't have any problem stopping people or anything like that. But half an hour and then an hour went by and Tripurari had distributed 5 and then 10 books, but I couldn't get anybody to stop and shake my hand even. It was incredible, but I knew it was because I was too proud. Another hour went by and still no one would stop and shake my hand. I was bewildered because I wanted to pass out Prabhupada's books. Finally, I just sat down out of frustration and I was nearly crying. Tripurari came up and preached to me. He told me I should pray to Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda in times like this, and not to worry about it. This happens. So I got it together, and then about 10 to 15 people in a row came and talked with me, and some of them took books. So when we discussed it afterward, we could understand that we were just instruments in Lord Chaitanya's hands. This is how we developed the Sankirtana philosophy. Through the book distribution, we came to realize who Prabhupada was and to appreciate him more. Latika. All mm, day, I would stand at the top of the stairs, and thousands of people would come by, and we would distribute hundreds and hundreds of books. We used to talk lines from Prabhupada's books. Tripurari used to talk about the swans taking milk from water. So we used to use that a lot in approaching someone. We would say how these great sages used to know how to separate milk from water, separate the essence. He also said the pictures were windows to the spiritual world. We'd say this book is like the brilliant sun that will drive away the darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali. I found the best way to distribute books was to use Prabhupada's own words. Prabhupada said if we read one line to someone, that person can make 100 times spiritual advancement. One time, a devotee complained to Prabhupada that people were throwing some of the books away. But then we could understand that Prabhupada wanted them distributed in on large scale. Not that you kept the book for a special person you thought might be intelligent enough to read it. Because Prabhupada said that if they read only one line, they would be very much affected. So he could understand that Prabhupada wanted mass distribution, not that we just um, keep them for the special right people person. Sura. Vaisheshika was selling books in the airport with me. He would walk up to people and say, "Well, how are you doing, sir?" All glories to Sri Krishna Sankirtan movement, the prime benediction for humanity at large, which cleanses the heart. He was repeating the Sikshashtakam prayers of Lord Chaitanya right out of the book, and yet he was selling books. The books had pictures of Krishna and devotional scenes on the cover, and sometimes some devotees couldn't understand how people could relate to these books, but Prabhupada wanted them distributed, and he was saying that we should preach on the merit of the book. When a devotee asked Prabhupada what we should say to distribute the books, Prabhupada replied, Krishne Swa Dhamopagate, which is the verse that says the Srimad Bhagavatam is as brilliant as sun and it has arisen just to give people a religion in this age of darkness. So we were also repeating that verse and disputing books on faith. We would go out and see the people actually becoming struck by Krishna consciousness. They would see that the devotees were very sincere and serious, and they would become impressed. Daily on Sankirtan, we would see people appreciating Prabhupada's books. There was also harassment, but Prabhupada had talked about it, that there was always difficulty. So everything was there from Prabhupada to confirm whatever realizations we had. Srila Prabhupada said a book salesman would sometimes have difficulty because he'll be sometimes accepted and sometimes rejected, but he tolerates. In the airport, we met professors, lawyers, all kinds of people who would stop and talk. They would challenge, and we would constantly have to defend Prabhupada's books and his movement and speak up on behalf of Prabhupada, more so than when we were just kids out on the parking lots talking to women and begging 50 cents for a pack of incense. We were presenting Prabhupada's books to the scholars, coming into contact with Mayavadis, scientists, businessmen, people who were very sharp in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and San Diego. People there were very sharp and hard, and just by having to spiritually combat them and defend the movement, we became more mature in our understanding of Prabhupada's books and how to present them in such a way that we could convince even people who didn't want to be convinced. We had to study Prabhupada's books. In 1974, several new parties formed just for distributing books. Tripurari had been traveling as an emissary from Los Angeles, but now, with Srila Prabhupada's permission, he formed a Bhakti Vedanta Book Trust Sankirtana party of some leading book distributors. The book BBT distributors stationed themselves in various airports around the country, creating a significant increase in book distribution. Your entire program is approved by me, Prabhupada wrote to Tripurari. When Tripurari asked if he could take sannyas, Prabhupada replied that he was already doing more than any sannyasi. In one letter, Prabhupada called him the incarnation of book distribution. Book distribution took another great stride forward when Tamal Krishna Goswami, Srila Prabhupada's zonal secretary in India for 4 years, returned to US. Joining with his friend Vishnujan Swami, he helped from the Radha Damodar Sankirtan party traveling in a bus with Radha Krishna deities to distribute books and hold festivals all over the US. Tamal Krishna Goswami. When we first began the Radha Damodar party, our idea was to make as many devotees as possible by holding festivals at which we chanted Hare Krishna and distributed prasadam. After Krishna sent so many nice young men, it was difficult to keep them always engaged. Then suddenly a letter arrived from Srila Prabhupada in which he said that the kirtan of book distribution was better than the kirtan of public chanting. This transcendental instruction changed the course of our Radha Damodar party. From then on, I concentrated more and more on book distribution, and then this gave Prabhupada greater and greater pleasure. I had been in India for 4 years, but our main program had been enrolling life members. But now that I was in America, Srila Prabhupada was reminding me that preaching meant to distribute his books. So I became inspired that our party should distribute so many books that it equal all of the other book distributions of the rest of ISKCON worldwide. Day and night, I was thinking of how to get out more and more books and then overflood America with transcendental literature. Srila Prabhupada wrote to me that this was his real ambition to turn all of America into Vaishnavas. Until we formed our Radha Damodar party, the method of distributing books had been that an individual would be given either a large, medium, or small book according to the size of the donation. But Prabhupada told me that of all types of book distribution, to distribution his large books was most important. So I was almost considering how to increase the number of large books. The problem was that people were willing to give small donations, but rarely would they give us large enough contributions to avoid giving them a large book. Then Krishna gave me the idea that by adding together a few small donations from a number of persons, at least one of them could be given a large book, while the others could be given a Back to Godhead magazine or a small book. By this method, we were able to increase the distribution of big books tremendously. Prabhupada fully approved of this idea. As long as the book fund received payments of the books, Srila Prabhupada allowed us to pass them out as quickly as we could, irrespective of the size of donation. Thus, our Radha Damodar party was able to distribute as many as 50,000 big books in a single month. Ooh. Srila Prabhupada showed special interest in the Radha Damodar party and approved loans from the BBT for purchase of more buses, thus creating a Sankirtan army traveling in renovated grey-hulled buses. By the end of 1974, the Radha Damodar party had 3 buses, vans, and numerous men. Prabhupada called the buses moving temples, and he urged the Radha Damodar devotees to continue their program with certainty that they were pleasing Lord Chaitanya. I am glad that you have understood the importance of my books, Prabhupada wrote. Therefore, I am stressing it so much. Let everyone take these books. Srila Prabhupada encouraged the Radha Damodar party to expand to hundreds of buses and thus fulfill the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to bring Krishna consciousness to every town and village. When a tight transcendental competition arose between the Los Angeles Temple Tripurari's BBT party and Radha Damodar party, Prabhupada watched and approved it with pleasure. Another party forming in 1974 was the BBT Library Party. It began with Hridayananda Goswami's sending some brahmacharis from his traveling party to visit prestigious universities in in New England. The men attempted to sell entire sets of Srila Prabhupada's books to the professors, and even in their first attempts, they met with great success. Srila Prabhupada had long cherished this idea, and even before coming to America, he had gone to libraries in India with copies of his Srimad Bhagavatam. First canto by his efforts in New Delhi, the United States Library of Congress had obtained copies of those early volumes. Now, this desire to see his books placed in all the US libraries and universities was becoming a reality. Within a few months, professors began writing favorable reviews, and some even ordered Prabhupada's books for their college courses. I am very much like this program of the standing orders. Prabhupada wrote, try to increase it up to 50,000 such orders from the libraries. Another party that formed in 1974 was Namahatta, a group of brahmacharis led by two sannyasis. The Namahatta party would travel and distribute books, donating their profits towards Srila Prabhupada's projects in Bombay, Mayapur, and Vrindavan. When Srila Prabhupada became ill for several weeks in September of the 1974, the book distribution reports were his best medicine. Whenever I get report of my books selling, he wrote to the library party, I feel strength. Even now in this weakened condition, I had got strength from your report. And during the same illness, he wrote to Rameshwar regarding book sales. Figures, please endeavor in this way. This is the only solace of my life. When I hear that my books are selling so nicely, I become energetic like a young man. Srila Prabhupada recovered his health, and by end of 1974, his BBT was also in extraordinary health, and with Temple again competing in a furious Christmas marathon. In America, the BBT reported to Prabhupada that approximately 3,87,000 hardbound books have been sold during the year, a 67% increase over the previous year, and almost 40, no, 40 lakh back to quarter magazines had been sold and average an 89% increase. The American BBT sold the individual temples a total of 6,668,000 pieces of literature, a 60% increase. Such news made Srila Prabhupada become energetic like a young man, and Prabhupada and his book distribution movement headed in 1975 with all signs of increasing, doubling, and tripling the already astounding figures of 1974. Srila Prabhupada had created his Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in 1972 as an independent entity to ensure that his books could continue being produced and distributed. The BBT would operate exclusively for the benefit of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and yet it would exist independently. The trust document stated that the trustees should divide the money from the sales of the books to ISKCON temples into two funds, one for printing books and one for purchasing ISKCON property and building temples. Prabhupada believed that if this 50-50 formula were followed, Krishna would assure the success of ISKCON. Repeatedly, he would refer to this formula in conversations and letters, even in his purports on Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada gave his BBT trustees authority to make printing plans, and trustees would then consult him for approval. He would set the standards and guidelines for his BBT trustee to follow. Only after consulting him could they institute changes. And to changes, Prabhupada was particularly averse. He would choose the book size, determine the artwork, and make suggestions about the size of a particular printing, about shipping policies, about sales to temples, about almost every aspect of BBT's publishing activities. Even when certain temples did not remit their payments to BBT, Prabhupada would become involved. If no, sorry, it is not good if such big temples who are setting the example for the whole society do not pay their bills. This is most irregular. I am trying to retire from the administrative affairs, but if the presidents and GBC's men make such disturbances, then how can I be peaceful? Things should be maintained automatically, then it will be peaceful for me. He was a strict manager. Ac- According to Vedic instruction, he said, fire, debt, and disease should never be neglected. They must be extinguished by all means. Srila Prabhupada saw book distribution as, among other things, the basis for an economically sound ISKCON. Other businesses could also operate, but book selling was the best, for it combined preaching with a good source of income. As he wrote to one of his temple presidents, I am very encouraged by the report of how nicely our books are being distributed. This is our main business all over the world. If you give full attention to this, there will never be any shortage of funds. And on another occasion, regarding the society's leaders emphasizing business, you should understand what is the meaning of business. Business means to help the preaching. Preaching needs financial help. Otherwise, we have no need for business. So far as I understand, our business book business is sufficient to support our movement. Srila Prabhupada also oversaw all BBT loans to temples. Any GBC secretaries or temple presidents requesting a loan would have to approach him. In 1973 and 74, he granted sizable loans for building, purchasing, or improving temples in Dallas, Hawaii, mm, Sydney, Chicago, and Vancouver. He also granted a loan to Radha Damodar Party for buying traveling temples or buses, and one to South America for printing books. Kirtanananda Maharaj automatically received a $50,000 loan each year for the new Vrindavan. But Prabhupada would deny money requests for projects he considered inconsistent with the purposes of BBT. On November 6, he wrote to Rameshwar, "No, we cannot loan BBT money for any other purposes than what is mentioned in the BBT agreement. These other loans for cows, equipments, and restaurants must all be repaid, and no other loans other than for publishing and temple construction can be granted." Beginning in 1974, Srila Prabhupada utilized the BBT profits for constructing his main temples in India, Vrindavan, Mayapur, and especially Bombay. Rameshwar informed the devotees of the special function of the BBT. Srila Prabhupada is personally overseeing all the Indian programs and spending. If 1 rupee is misspent, Srila Prabhupada becomes disturbed and chastises the devotees mercifully. And this money is earned by the sweat of many devotees. So why you are not careful? Srila Prabhupada wants to see a Vrindavan temple, Sri Krishna Balaram Mandir, completed by Janmashtami. Prabhupada wants to establish Sri Mayapur temple as well. One interesting note in this connection is that in India, I have been told that 10 paisa purchases 1 brick. 10 paisas means US $0.01. Just think, every penny you collect may buy 1 brick in India. Every penny counts towards these transcendental goals. These places in India, Prabhupada wrote, are spiritually potent. By establishing temple in Mayapur and Vrindavan, we assure that the purity of our movement will be kept intact. In October of 1974, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Hansaduta, his GBC secretary for Germany, "Whenever there is any publication in any language, it enlivens me 100 times." Although Srila Prabhupada's order from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was to preach and publish in the English language, he had expanded that order to include all languages and countries of the world. My first concern is that my books shall be published and distributed profusely all over the world. Srila Prabhupada had written to one of the first devotees in Europe in 1972. Prabhupada wrote always in English, but ever since 1968, when Srila Prabhupada had first begun spreading to other countries, he had been talking of printing his books in foreign languages. When in early 1973 a German edition of Bhagavad Gita had been printed, Srila Prabhupada had written to Hansaduta, "You have done the right thing by printing Bhagavad Gita in German language, and I very much appreciate that you have done this great service." By the summer, Sankirtan parties had been traveling throughout Germany, distributing several hundred copies of Bhagavad Gita a week. Hansaduta had promised that he would translate 1 book a month in uh, German, and when in the fall of 1974, Prabhupada heard of 6 recently printed German translations, he replied, "This is very happy news for me. Thank you. Overflood Europe with German books." Srila Prabhupada said that whenever he published a book, he felt that he had conquered an empire. His books were the basis of the spiritual revolution that would eventually change humanity and save it from the pernicious effects of the age of Kali. Produce voluminously Spanish language literature, Srila Prabhupada requested. When Hridayananda Goswami had become the zonal lead for South America, Srila Prabhupada had instructed him to emphasize printing and distributing books above opening temples. I also was printing even before I had big temples in the US. Prabhupada had written. So you may follow the footsteps of the previous acharyas. Hridayananda Goswami had organized a Spanish BBT in Mexico and had made book distribution his priority. Early in 1974, when the Spanish BBT was ready to print translations of Srimad Bhagavatam's first volume, Bhagavad Gita and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada wrote, By printing these books of our Krishna conscious philosophy in so many different languages, we can actually inject our movement into the masses of people all over the world, especially there in the Western countries, and we literally turn whole nations into Krishna conscious nations. When 100,000 copies of Spanish Back to God magazine were printed, Srila Prabhupada wrote, now give them to everyone. Spanish book distribution became the second largest in the world next to America. Bhagavan, Sri Prabhupada's representative in Southern Europe, had been printing in French and Italian, and as early as December 1972, he had printed Prabhupada's Easy Journey to Other Planets in French. By the beginning of 1974, three parties in France were distributing daily 1,000 books, including a French Bhagavad Gita as it is. Although Bhagwan had printed the first Italian Back to Godhead and a French Sri Ishopanishad was forthcoming. Wherever devotees went, they knew their program was to chant Hare Krishna, follow the regulative principles, and arrange for printing and distributing Srila Prabhupada books. When the first devotees had reached South Africa, they had proceeded just according to Srila Prabhupada's desire, and he had replied to them, your report is very encouraging to me that you distributed 110 Githas in 2 days in Cape Town. Srila Prabhupada often thought of having these books printed in Russian, and he wrote to Minister of Education and Culture in the USSR suggesting them publish a translation of ancient classical Vedic literature, namely Bhagavad Gita, as already published by the famous London publishing house of MSS Ma- Macmillan Company. He also talked with his disciples about printing Russian translations in America. Whenever Srila Prabhupada met an interested person proficient in any foreign language, he would request that person to translate his books. In 1972, he had written, I am also very encouraged to hear that Japanese language translations of some of my books will be brought out soon because without books and magazine, what authority or what basis have we got for preaching? Similarly, Srila Prabhupada had written to an American devotee in Indonesia. I am especially happy to hear that you have got a Chinese boy there who is doing some translating work. Yes, the Chinese speaking portion of the world is very huge and it requires to infiltrate gradually, especially by distributing our literatures widely in Chinese languages. So his service is the greatest to Krishna. Later, when Prabhupada heard that the Chinese boy Yashamati Sutta had finished translating 3 chapters of Bhagavad Gita into Chinese, he wrote that they should immediately print those 3 chapters as a small book. ISKCON Australia rose to prominence in the book distribution competition and by 1974 was competing with Los Angeles ISKCON and Radha Damodar Party for world leadership. By the fall of 1974, about a dozen top Australian and New Zealand distributors were selling daily more than 20 big books, etc. Big books each. The center in Australia, like those in America, more than doubled their book distribution between 1973 and 74. When book distribution had been just beginning in America in 1970, no books had been available in England. But within a year, Krishna book distribution had begun there, and Srila Prabhupada had written, all of my disciples in London Center are very intelligent and they should unite around this single task of selling Krishna book widely throughout Britain. In 1974, the devotees in Britain were valiantly distributing books. During one busy 6-day period, they distributed 600 volumes of teachings of Lord Chaitanya, 400 of Srimad Bhagavatam, and 1,000 Back to Godhead magazines. India was special. There, Srila Prabhupada had introduced book distribution through the ISKCON Life Member Program. Wealthy Indians were more inclined to accept the books as part of a ISKCON membership package, which included such benefit as free accommodation in ISKCON temples throughout the world. But in India, as elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada wanted his books distributed to colleges, to libraries, to prominent citizens, and to the masses. By the end of 1974, Prabhupada's disciples were ready to print Hindi and Bengali editions of Back to Godhead. When Srila Prabhupada heard that Western devotees in India were complaining of insufficient engagement, he replied, I am very pleased you are selling many Krishna books daily. All our members should go out with books. There is sufficient engagement. To his GBC secretary in India, he wrote, engage all of them in book distribution, especially and take with you some Sankirtan party. Without books, we will make no progress in India. Srila Prabhupada had written to Tejas, his temple president in Delhi. Prabhupada had also trained his leaders in India in strict policy of 50-50. Proceeds from life members or any other collection should go 50% to the BBT and 50% for construction and other projects. On his orders, the American BBT had been making donations of books to India and by 1974 had donated $300,000 worth of literature. Although America was a leading pioneer in book printing and distribution, Prabhupada foresaw worldwide printing and distribution of his books, eventually to surpass that in the US. Srila Prabhupada had created transcendental competition among his disciples. In 1971, he had observed with pleasure Keshava in San Francisco leading the society in Krishna book distribution. Prabhupada had promised that he would leave Los Angeles and stay in San Francisco if Keshava out-distributed his brother Karandhara. And over the years, he had continued to instigate such competition, fanning the fire of book distribution. He would encourage the leaders to send him reports, and then he would respond with letters, raising the book distribution fever even higher. The whole of ISKCON waited to hear the latest quote from Prabhupada, inspiring them to go on and on. When Srila Prabhupada had given the lecture in the 1974 stressing, distribute books, distribute books. Several devotees in the audience have vowed on the spot to dedicate their life to that instruction. And when Prabhupada had sent the handwritten mm, note down from his room in Los Angeles, everyone should go with a Sankirtan party as soon as possible. That one line had created a spirit of sacrifice and dedication in the hearts of many disciples who felt themselves destined to take up that order as their life and soul. Although Rameshwara had been caught up by the waves of Sankirtan ocean from the beginning, Srila Prabhupada cast Rameshwara's service when he wrote, make program to distribute our books all over the world. Our books are being appreciated by learned circles, so we should take advantage. Whatever progress we made, we have made is simply due to distributing these books. So go on and do it. Do not divert your mind for a moment from this. When devotees in London reported to Srila Prabhupada their increase in book magazine sales, he responded by inviting them to compete. I have heard that in San Francisco they are selling daily not less than 75 Krishna books. So I am very much encouraged to hear this. Now take the spirit of transcendental rivalry and consult with Dayananda and others there in England to become the first rate bookseller. When writing to a sannyasi disciple preaching in Scotland, where the devotees were perhaps not fully aware of scope of book distribution in the US, Srila Prabhupada mentioned the latest book scores from the New York and commented, New York is leading the list. Srila Prabhupada also inspired the society as a whole to compete with its previous year's efforts. Somehow the book distribution must be doubled and tripled as far as possible. Do it. As soon as the BBT Library Party had been formed, Prabhupada had told the members to get 50,000 orders, and he had asked the Radha Damodar Party to expand to 100 buses. The competition was particularly high between Los Angeles, the Radha Damodar Party, and Australia, and Srila Prabhupada encouraged them all like a maestro calling for a fortissimo from the orchestra. Srila Prabhupada was not giving careless, boastful instructions. The determination and sacrifice required to achieve these seemingly unattainable goals he knew well, and he wanted his devotees to work as he worked with total dedication. He wanted them to try their utmost. His own, his was the his was the logic of hunting for the rhinoceros. He said, if a man attempting to shoot a rhinoceros failed, no one would criticize him. But if he succeeded, it would be considered wonderful. Prabhupada wrote to Rupanuga. Your Sankirtan reports are very encouraging, especially that one girl, Gauri Dasi, has seen an all ISKCON women's record of 108 big books. This is very wonderful. Formerly, this would have been considered impossible, but now, by Krishna's grace, everything is becoming possible. Encourage them all to increase more and more. Some devotees became confused by their god brothers and god sisters, rousing calls for competition and rivalry. This seemed like the rivalry of material world, which they had hoped to leave forever. Srila Prabhupada, however, explained the proper attitude of transcendental competition. Competition and profiteering spirit are always there there in the living entity. It is not that they can be artificially removed in some matter. Actually, we saw in the Russia that by removing competition and profit calculation from society, people were not at all happy, and still these things are going on. So we shall not expect that we are different. Only difference is that our profit is for Krishna's pleasure, and our competition is how to please Krishna more than someone else. Every sorry, even amongst the gopis there is competition to please Krishna, and there is envy also, but their envy is not material, it is transcendental. They are thinking, oh, she has done something more wonderful than me. That's very nice, but now let me do something even more wonderful, like that. So I am pleased that you desire for competition with your sorry God brothers to spread Krishna consciousness movement all over the world by printing our books. When a traveling Sankirtan party from one temple intensively distributed books in another city, the authorities of local temple would often be disturbed. This problem came before Srila Prabhupada, who was inevitably called in to judge and to cool down the fires of competition. Prabhupada wrote to Keshava and Bhutatma, who had traveled all the way from San Francisco to London to distribute books, but had distributed the devotees there, there by their fervor. Not distributed, disturbed the devotees there by their fervor. Ultimately, it shall be up to the local temple presidents if the presence of your party is favorable or not. Everything considered, if he agrees, you may stay. Otherwise, if he judges it is unfavorable at the time, he may order you to go out. But just to avoid these things, better to arrange in advance with GBC member concerned. Ours is a cooperative movement with Krishna and the advancement of Krishna consciousness at the center. And we must continue to sell as many books as possible. But discuss everything amongst yourselves and do it nicely without irritating anyone. That is the art. Seeing the mighty efforts of the top book distributors, some devotees became envious or at least dispirited, thinking themselves unless and unable to please Srila Prabhupada. This problem also came before Srila Prabhupada, who replied, there must always be competition that gives life, that cannot be separated from life. The perfect society does not eliminate competition, but it eliminates envy, because everyone is weak before Krishna. But competition had its limits, as Prabhupada explained to a doubting brahmachari in Florida. It is not so much important the quantity of books that were distributed, but that we serve Krishna before we can and distribute on Him for the result. But it should not come to the point of making us lose our Krishna consciousness. When you have these feelings, do not mistake it for enviousness, but take it to be on indirect appreciation of the does service done by your God brothers. This is spiritual. In the material world, when let me write on the screen. Yeah. In the material world, when someone surpasses us in some way, we become angry and plan how to stop him. But in the spiritual world, when someone does more better service, we think, oh, he has done so nicely. Let me help him to execute his service. Competition might have been a catalyst, but by steadfastly distributing Srila Prabhupada books, the members of Krishna consciousness movement were experiencing the essence of loving service to Krishna in separation, which is the highest spiritual ecstasy. Don't try to see God. Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master had often said, but you act in a such a way that God sees you. In other words, by submissively acting on the order of servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, Prabhupada's disciples were sure to attract Krishna's loving attention. The quickest way to catch Krishna's attention, Srila Prabhupada said, was to direct another person to Krishna consciousness. The book distributors, therefore, felt in felt a special reciprocation with their spiritual master, and this impelled them to go on serving and distributing. Sanjaya. Philosophically, we saw that going out and distributing books was what our spiritual master wanted us to do. We knew that. That was clear to us. We also had a real sense of idealism that these books and magazines would change the world. Once you come to Krishna consciousness, you actually see how crumpy the world uh, really is, how really contaminated things are, how envious people are, and how horrible material life is. You can see that. You don't feel that you yourself can change it, but you feel that whoever gets one of Prabhupada's books and looks at it will be changed in a spiritual way. There was no question about it. We also felt a big change would come in the world and in the future as Krishna consciousness spread. Prabhupada also said that if people just touch one of these books, their lives will change. Our faith was in the books and Srila Prabhupada. Keshav Bharati. When you pass out a book, there is certain reciprocation from Prabhupada. There was a dramatic difference in our internal experience when a person would take a book compared to just taking some incense or something. We would actually experience Prabhupada's association all day, but distribution by distributing those books. We didn't feel left out just because certain books were physically closer to Prabhupada. Book distributors always got strong enlightenment. We would read about Haridas Thakur going out and uh, rolling on the ground and begging people to chant. That kind of thing would inspire us. Vaisheshika. We had Prabhupada's books and different letters from him. And we also knew that if we distributed lots of books, we could get our name in the newsletters and we could think of how Prabhupada would read it. But I was just trying to keep up with others. Sometimes I would go a couple of hours without giving anyone a book. Everyone else would just be passing them out like crazy. I would try, and people would all but spit in my face. They were pushing me around. It was very heavy for me. I would sometimes just walk off and start crying. It was so heavy. But I knew this book distribution was pleasing to Prabhupada and I just wanted to be part of it. We used to think how Prabhupada was spending so much time behind a dictating machine just writing these books. We would meditate on how he would sleep just as a few hours a day and minimize everything else to write these books. So we were also trying to cut down our other activities and just go out and distribute books. Prabhupada said a devotee should live in the mood of six Goswamis. So we were singing those prayers every day. Did I say something? Every day? Oh, 1 second. Every day, correct. We felt a real connection. Even in beginning, a devotee told me, Where is Prabhupada? Do you know? And then he said, he is in his books. That mood was always there. We always felt that connection. Um, Jagadhatri Devidasi. When I was distributing Prabhupada books, I understood that that was the most pleasing thing I could do for him. I was helping him to fulfill his spiritual master's instructions, and so he was pleased, and he was even more pleased if I did it nicely. I always used to hear the story about how Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati would be happy if someone went out and distributed even one magazine because it's actually the mood of Sankirtan of going out and trying to give mercy to the conditioned souls that count. I always wanted to do welfare work. I like the feeling of doing something for people. So this is the summon bonum of helping people. You are helping them to go back to Godhead. So that was my conviction, so my motivation. And we automatically become purified by bringing other living entities to Krishna. Tripurari. I got inspired mostly by Prabhupada's greatness, how he was staunchly following his Guru Maharaj. It was his Guru Maharaj's order, and therefore he was doing it. I was never such scholarly or intelligent. I never thought that I had much brains or talent. I was never trained practically in any kind of skills, and I didn't have much education. I took it like that. That I was talking to the most fallen people and that I was the most fallen myself. I was just doing what Prabhupada wanted because he wanted. I would pray to Prabhupada to help me realize why he wanted book distribution. Then within, I would get inspiration and it would come out in all my talks about book distribution. That time that I stayed out at the airport when all the devotees went back with Prabhupada to the temple, very much affected by my whole spiritual life. I was very much intimately connected with Prabhupada, but my closest association with him was by following his instructions and just getting down to work and not trying to enjoy the spiritual master but serve him. Vrindavan Vilasini Devidasi. When Prabhupada gave that famous lecture in Los Angeles, distribute books, distribute books, distribute books, right then I wanted to take it up. Whenever he wrote to Rameshwar, it was really to Rameshwar and company. We all felt included. We are all internal book distributors, a team together, and I wanted to be part of it. It was Lord Chaitanya's eternal Sankirtan movement, and we all wanted to be part of it. It it's going on in every planet, in every universe. I know it is pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. I would relate to book distribution like the Battle of Kurukshetra. It's a battle, but Krishna is right there. It's like Kurukshetra number two. I am sure all book distributors feel like that. You feel like Krishna is right there, and he's going to win. You just have to take shelter of him. You may not win this battle, but you win the overall war. So I always felt connected with Prabhupada because he is telling us in his books about the great devotees that we can take shelter of. It's all by his mercy. He is giving us these books, and he is in these books. Sura. We were so much addicted to selling Prabhupada books that we didn't want to do anything else. We wanted just go straight to the airport and start distributing and not stop, except for maybe a 20-minute lunch break and maybe some reading for 20 minutes, otherwise non-stop until 7:30 or 8 at night. We really felt that Srila Prabhupada was protecting us. One time out at the airport, I was given a BBT newsletter. Maybe it was due to exhaustion, or maybe it was due to some false sentimentality or whatever. But I was reading Prabhupada's remarks about book distribution, and I became very moved. I was my I was by myself at the airport, and I just started crying because I thought of how devotees all over the world are so beautiful, so wonderful hearted, distributing books and working so hard. I was just really appreciating Prabhupada and the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada had said something in the newsletter about book distribution and it just touched me. We were so absorbed in books, that whatever Prabhupada would say anything about book distribution, we would go nuts. That meant it was our connection to Prabhupada. We weren't big guns who could sit at a meeting with Prabhupada or get personal attention so much. Maybe during some morning walks at Mayapur festival, we got to sneak in with the sannyasis, but otherwise, our book distribution was our connection with Prabhupada. When he would mention something about book distribution, it would be our life and soul. Lavanga Lalitika Devidasi. Having heard Srila Prabhupada speak and knowing that he was always reading from these books, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that he was preaching that you have to distribute this knowledge to others, made it all very simple. That is, you just knew that this was Srila Prabhupada's desire. He was always telling us that he was giving us this knowledge, and that once you have this knowledge, you have to distribute it to others. Srila Prabhupada came to America to preach with his disciples, so we must do it because it's Prabhupada's desire. He spent so much time translating these books to be distributed. You just want to distribute to others, and you want people to have these books in their homes. Vrindavan, India, April 20, 1975. Srila Prabhupada installed the deities for the grand opening of Krishna Balaram Mandir. Almost 1,000 disciples were present, and the governor of Uttar Pradesh was the guest of honor. After years of hard endeavor, the grand opening was uh, climatic triumph for Srila Prabhupada and his movement. While still standing at the altar after having offered the first arati to Krishna and Balaram, Prabhupada addressed the crowd explaining that this was an international temple where people from all over the world could come to worship and take shelter of Gaur Nitai, Krishna Balaram, and Radha Krishna. Later that evening, Srila Prabhupada sat in his room with a few GBC men. The buttons on his kurta open because of the heat, his legs and bare feet extended under the low table he relaxed, and his men sat close around him in the dim light of the desk lamp. It was a milestone, he said, but still they had to go forward, not merely savor their success. Many things were still required to make the temple and guest house operative. Srila Prabhupada was thinking beyond Vrindavan. This temple construction is so important, he said, that I am willing to spend many lakhs to open a temple like this. And yet, as important as it is, the book production is even more important. This was a significant reaffirmation of the priority of book production, even while in the midst of this splendid temple opening, he was stressing that book production was more important. Srila Prabhupada seemed displeased, however, because for months his Chaitanya Charitamrita had been delayed by his Sanskrit editor. He said with a scowl that although he had finished the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it remained unpublished. He had also completed all four volumes of fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and was beginning the fifth, yet yet only one volume of fourth canto had been published. One of the devotees present, not understanding Prabhupada's point, remarked that since Prabhupada was going next to Hawaii, he would be able to ride there in peace and quiet. Prabhupada replied that he was not encouraged to write when his manuscripts were not being published. The BBT Press, after several years in New York, was about to relocate to Los Angeles, where Rameshwar would become the new BBT Press supervisor. Rameshwar, unaware of the delays in publishing the Chaitanya Charitamrita manuscript, learned of it now in Vrindavan. He promised Prabhupada that he would immediately get the press set up in Los Angeles and begin producing Chaitanya Charitamrita. That Srila Prabhupada had completed the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita manuscript in 18 months during 1973 and 74 was a remarkable feat. In those same months, he was being intensely engaged in many affairs of management while constantly traveling. He had confronted many problems with leaders who had left their posts. He was personally attended he had personally attended to GBC duties in India, and he had dealt with other ISKCON managerial affairs. He had authorized many large BBT loans and had approved the expansion and development of ISKCON in all areas of the world. In addition to responding regularly to large volumes of mail, speaking daily to guests, and giving Bhagavatam lectures wherever he went. His only time for writing had been on arising at 1 in the morning, and he had persistently worked 2 or 3 hours each day. While Srila Prabhupada traveled from Vrindavan to Australia, Rameshwar and Radha Vallabha worked in Los Angeles to establish the new BBT offices. Prabhupada was still meditating on his completed Chaitanya Charitamrita manuscript, waiting for to be published. From Australia, he wrote, Chaitanya Charitamrita is complete, 12 parts, and only 3 parts are published. And now the fifth canto is almost finished. So, why these books are not being published? This is our first business. Immediately, these pending books, 17 in total, must be published. Why the delay? The US printer's binding is better than Dea Nippon. So, some may be printed in the US and some in Japan, but the pending books must be finished in a very short time. When I see so many books pending, it doesn't encourage me to translate. When I see books printed, I become encouraged to write more and more. We can talk this over more in Hawaii. Now you and Hansaduta expedite the publishing work. This is your business. And push on the selling. You request Tripurari Maharaj in this connection along with others. Now, Bhavananda Swami and Gargas Muni Swami are there. They are also expert in pushing this on. By combined effort, publish as quickly as possible and immediately Chetan Charitamrita should be done. In Los Angeles, Rameshwar had only completed the lease agreements for a new building for the press. The BBT artists had just arrived, and editors, proofreaders, and other production workers would soon be coming. The press had published a computer typesetter, and the devotees were being trained to use it. Carpenters knocked down walls to build a photo lab and dark room. Additional plumbing had been to be installed. The entire press had to be set up within 1 month. Srila Prabhupada was coming in June and everything would have to be ready and running. By the time Srila Prabhupada reached Hawaii in May, the press in Los Angeles was preparing for operation. Srila Prabhupada's secretary phoned Los Angeles office. Prabhupada is angry. He keeps talking about the unpublished books. You'd better be prepared when he arrives. Rameshwar and Radha Vallabha had investigated the necessities and difficulties in printing the Chaitanya Charitamrita manuscript, which they concluded would come to 17 volumes. One of the main problems they discovered was the lack of an expert Bengali editor. Most of the Chaitanya Charitamrita was in Bengali. Although the BBT editors were experienced in Sanskrit, because they were not proficient in Bengali, the work was progressively slow. After Prabhupada wanted many printing, sorry, also Srila Prabhupada wanted many paintings in his books, and the art department would need many months to meet his requirements. Never before the BBT lagged so far behind Srila Prabhupada. Rameshwar and Radha Vallabha, straining their brains to produce book quickly and efficiently, devised a stepped up production schedule. By the old schedule, they could publish a book every 3 or 4 months, but on the new schedule, they decided they could produce a book a month. In that way, they would eventually catch up with Srila Prabhupada. Rameshwar was eager to present Prabhupada with this plan when he came to Los Angeles. More phone calls came from Prabhupada's secretary. Prabhupada had heard about the presentation of press buildings, but he had also heard that his name had not been displayed on the front of BBT building. He was always insistent to preserve ISKCON's disciplic succession, foreseeing that unless ISKCON stressed A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami as the founder Acharya in the future, persons might claim their rights of ISKCON leadership or of the ownership of ISKCON property. In the rush for completing the buildings, the BBT managers has overlooked this important detail. June 20, 1975. On arriving in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada received a joyous welcome. He was accompanied by leading sannyasis and GBC secretaries, including Kirtanananda Swami, Vishnu Jana Swami, Brahmananda Swami, Tamala Krishna Goswami, and others. Later, sitting in his room, one of his favorites in all of ISKCON, he spoke only briefly about backlog of unprinted books. He seemed mildly disturbed but said little. He was very pleased, however, to see the temple and the deities of Rukmini Dwarakadish. In his short arrival speech, he had explained why he was so urgently pressing his disciples to produce his books. I have no personal qualification, he had said from the plushy upholstered Vyasasan. But I simply try to satisfy my Guru, that's all. My Guru Maharaj asked me that if you get some money, you print books. So there was a private meeting talking. Some of my important god brothers also were there. It was in Radha Kund. So Guru Maharaj was speaking to me that since we have got this Bhag Bazaar marble temple, there has been so much dissension, and everyone thinking who will occupy this room or that room. I wish therefore to sell this temple and the marble and print some books. Yes, so I took up this from his mouth that he is very fond of books, and he told me personally, if you get some money, print books. Therefore, I'm stressing on this point. Where is book? Where is book? So kindly help me. That is my request. Print as many books as possible in as many languages as possible and distribute throughout the whole world. Then the Krishna consciousness movement will automatically increase. The next morning, while walking on Venice Beach, Srila Prabhupada delivered an extraordinary ultimatum. Surrounded by devotees, he walked along, poking the sand softly with his cane. These 17 volumes unpublished, he began, are a great problem for our movement. Yes, Prabhupada, Rameshwar responded, attentive and concerned. The other devotees also nodded and commiserating. Something must be done. Yes, Prabhupada continued. They must be published immediately. Yes, Prabhupada. Rameshwar replied obediently. So I think they can be printed in 2 months. Srila Prabhupada said conclusively. Rameshwar wasn't sure he had heard correctly. The press had only just opened. The artist didn't even have the lights in the room. 2 months was illogical, impossible. Now was the moment to tell Srila Prabhupada the plan for increased production. Rameshwar stepped closer. Srila Prabhupada, he began. We have been meeting about this, and now that the press is finally here and established, I think we can increase production 4 times. We think that now we can go for producing one book every 4 months to producing one of your books every month. Now both Rameshwar and Radha Vallabh were walking together beside Srila Prabhupada with Tamal Krishna Goswami and Bhavan Brahmananda Swami walking on his other side. One book every month, Srila Prabhupada said, as if thinking out loud and considering it. That means over 1 year. It is not fast enough. The other devotees looked over at Rameshwar and Radhavallabh, who glanced at each other. You have to do all the books in 2 months' time, Srila Prabhupada said again. They had clearly heard it this time, and the two managers were stunned in disbelief. Srila Prabhupada, Rameshwar said, I think that's impossible. Maybe we can go faster. Srila Prabhupada suddenly stopped walking. Planting his cane firmly in the sand, he turned to Rameshwar and said, without anger but very gravely, impossible is a word found in the Fool's Dictionary. Suddenly, Rameshwar realized his spiritual life was on the line. To say impossible now would mean he had no faith in Krishna's representative, no faith in the power of God. He must throw away his material estimations and rational common sense. While Rameshwar and Radhavallabh stood speechless, Srila Prabhupada resumed walking, accompanied by the others. The two devotees hurried to catch up, but now everyone looked at them as if to say, come on, stop doubting, you have to do it. Rameshwar asked Srila Prabhupada if he could discuss this with other devotees at the press and then report back. Oh yes, Prabhupada replied, whatever is required. Rameshwar and Radhavallabh dropped back while Prabhupada and others continued down the beach. Srila Prabhupada returned to the temple and toured the new press facilities, a graphic arts building, and an editorial building. While walking outside on a second floor veranda, he noticed below a 2 foot strip of bare earth running between the two buildings. He seemed annoyed and said that they should plant grass there. In the layout room, a transparency of baby Krishna carrying Nanda Maharaj's shoes was on the light table, and Srila Prabhupada began laughing when he saw it. He approved of the new typesetting equipment which worked faster than the previous equipment, and when the devotees demonstrated it for him, he remarked that in India he had dreamed for having such a press. In Radha Vallabha's office, Prabhupada sat in the production manager's chair and looked up at the large bulletin board that displayed all the steps in the production of a book. He laughed and said, "For someone like me, this makes it even more complicated." Srila Prabhupada walked into every room in the two buildings and saw all the equipment. This modern technology was fine, he concluded, as long as they could use it to meet the deadline of 17 books in 2 months. Otherwise, their equipment was like the technology of the material scientists who tried to go to the moon useless. All through the morning program in the temple, Rameshwar and Radha Vallabha tried to concentrate on chanting their japa and on the Prabhupada's class, but all they could think of was arranging for the production of 17 volumes in 2 months. And by the time they met with press workers, they had become convinced it could be done. It was as if some mystical power was going to descend. Somehow or other, it could be done. So they presented the plan and convinced the other workers. "It can be done," Rameshwara said later, talking with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada replied. But there was some conditions, Rameshwar said. For the Bengali editing to go smoothly, the editors would have to be able to regularly consult Srila Prabhupada. Immediately Prabhupada agreed, adding that he was prepared to stay in Los Angeles as long as necessary to ensure that they meet the 2 month deadline. Another condition Rameshwar raised was that the artists would be working as quickly as humanly possible, but the paintings might not be of the best quality. A blind uncle is better than no uncle, Srila Prabhupada said. When Rameshwar mentioned that the artists would have many technical questions, Prabhupada agreed to make time to answer them. He also agreed that photographs of Indian holy places connected with Chaitanya Lila could be used to supplement the paintings. After their meeting with Srila Prabhupada, Rameshwara and Radha Vallabha felt that they had a chance. They left Srila Prabhupada's room, running down the stairs. The marathon was on. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hmm. Swami is there. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Swami.
We are done with a lengthy, nice chapter. That was just only half of the chapter we read.
Okay, Swami.
But it was very nice. What did you find?
Yeah, it's very great, Swami. Nice to hear.
Yeah, you can call me Sudama. Yeah.
Okay.
How about others?
Yes, thank you, Babuji, for this writing this nice chapter about work distribution. So we should team up our team for this work of for work distribution.
Yeah, the marathon is on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
By
you.
the way, I mean, I was thinking, if there's someone who is interested, they can have a Srimad Bhagavatam whole set from in English. I can arrange it. So if someone is interested, let me know. There's someone, I think you may know, right? Līlāmṛta Mataji, she was asking on Sunday if someone is there, then she can arrange. And it's a very nice opportunity. If someone wants it, if someone doesn't have yet, they can have. Okay, then thank you so much. It's already late. Wish you a nice evening, and let us see us in matter of 11 hours from now. पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। हरे कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna, Babuji.
Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai. Hare Krishna.